of a terror attack here in the United States, causing the visa waiver program to come under fire. Now, this program allows citizens from 38 different countries to travel to the United States without a visa for stays of 90 days or less. Now, there is growing fear this program could allow people recruited by ISIS to get into the United States. Michigan Congresswoman Candice Miller has just introduced legislation to counteract the problem. Congresswoman Miller goes on the record from the Capitol. Good evening, ma'am. And can you tell me what's the threat and what does your legislation seek to do?
Well, first of all, you mentioned I just introduced legislation. Actually, Greta, we were very successful in getting this legislation passed unanimously through the Homeland Security Committee here in the House. So every Democrat, every Republican has already voted for this piece of legislation. We're very hopeful. I've been talking to leadership. I'm hopeful that we will actually have a vote on the full floor here shortly. And as you mentioned, this is a program the United States started back in the 80s, actually, to expedite tourism. And, you know, it's a different world today than it was back in the 80s.
Yes. Would this legislation, if it gets put on the floor soon and passed, would it have prevented, for instance, the mastermind of the Paris terrorism? He was a citizen of Belgium. Belgium's within one of the 38 countries that does need a visa. Does your legislation prevent a guy like that from coming into the United States without a visa?
What my legislation essentially does is it says if you are one of the visa waiver countries, one of the 38 participating countries, and you do not share all of the information on your terrorist watch lists, all of the information sharing protocols, that we need to have a very high degree of confidence and comfort level that we're getting all the information that we need to make sure that we can allow for that to happen. And if not, then the Department of Homeland Security Secretary can eliminate or suspend that particular country from the visa waiver program.
Here's the problem, is that Paris apparently had 57 employees at Charles de Gaulle Airport on the watch list. They didn't know about it at all. They also had all this metadata gathering, and they didn't prevent this attack. So even if France was the most cooperative as could be, it's still, it's still a risk for us.
There's always a risk. There's always a risk. But I will tell you that almost every time there's one of these attacks over in Europe or some of the other participating countries, we find out after the fact that perhaps they had them, one of these individuals, on their watch list, but yet we weren't notified of it. So we absolutely need to have all of the notification that we possibly can. And you know, Greta, the 9/11 Commission said that for terrorists, really travel documents are as good as weapons. And that's what we need to think, like terrorists.
What about the microchip in passports? Our nation has it. What about other nations?
We need to look at all of that. We need to have e-passports, and we're looking at all of that within our legislation. And, you know, really the White House finally is starting to talk about this visa waiver program as well. And, of course, as I say here in the Congress, we've already passed this piece of legislation in our committee, and hopefully we're going to pass it in the House. There's a lot of talk in the Senate. I think, particularly with what's happened in Paris, this issue is ripe, as we say here on Capitol Hill, and hopefully it will pass. The terrorists are using our freedoms of a free and open society against us. We need to close every loophole that we possibly can. There is no second for information sharing.
Well, I know Speaker Ryan watches the show often, so if he's watching now, I hope he puts it up for a vote very soon. Anyway, Congresswoman, thank you.
Okay, thanks. Thank you.